Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, I got 6 stories, I think, from, again, all over the place, from different countries and everything. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, pull up a stump for sure, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This is something that I remember from one of the houses that we used to live in my childhood. I was maybe about 7 years old, and we had moved into this new house. For the first few months, everything is very normal, very calm, and just okay. After some time, though, strange things began to happen. One of our TVs would change the channels by itself, even when the remote control had no batteries in it. It would stop at random channels that were just static, and then the other TV were even scarier. Every time you turned it off, there would be what looked like 2 eyes would be beside you on the screen, a little faded and maybe all red. My parents realized quickly that there was something screwed up in this house, but they tried to play it cool for my sake. I started having nightmares every single night. In most of them, somebody would pick me up and take me away, and then I'd wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night in the bathtub or on the kitchen table. They said that I used to wake up in the middle of the night and wander around half asleep, and this never happened either before or after this. I've never sleptwalked since. But then my parents started acting weird too. They would stop by the side of my bed and just stare at me in silence for what felt like hours. Sometimes I would get these weird blanks of memory, like one time I was playing by a window and then everything turned black, and when I came to my senses, I was hanging from the back of my shirt up on the curtain rod. My mom found me and helped me before anything worse happened. Or another time I had been watching a cartoon and then I just went blank. By the time I came to, 2 hours had passed and I was laying down on the kitchen floor. I don't know what happened in that house, but I really hated living there. So this one night, I was driving to my girlfriend's to pick her up. It was around 11 p.m., and my nightly ritual when I do this is I loop around and wait by the tree line of a nearby park. I just sit there and smoke a cigarette and listen to music and have a chill time. I see movement out of the corner of my eye. There's something in my rearview mirror. I spin around to look, and I just see street lamps and shadows. And suddenly, a little girl runs from behind one tree to the other. She's probably only 4 to 6 years old and is wearing a red polka dot dress. My first thought is, why are you out here alone this late at night? So I'm unsettled now, and I see nobody else. The woods are still. And suddenly, bzzz, I jump out of my skin, but it's just a text from my girlfriend. It was my phone going off. So I go and pick her up, and I just forget about the weirdness that just happened. So about 2 months later, I started a new job as a cook, and I have some new friends. I decided to go to that same park around 1 a.m. to smoke a cigarette again, and this time I hear some people talking. I hear, "Hey Mark, are you gonna be a little bitch this time?" And Mark just says, "Screw off, guys." One guy says, "You're scared of being jumped by little girls?" And my memory engages. I remember what happened a couple months prior, and I hear Mark say, "I swear to you guys, there's a ghost girl in a red dress, and she ran out in front of me and scared the hell out of me the last time I was here." Everyone laughs, but I silently just sit there and go, "Oh shit." And I never went back to that park to smoke at 1 a.m. after that. So last summer, I was visiting my elderly mother on the Isle of Skye. She lives in a remote tiny village in the Sleep Peninsula. So I'm driving to town on the main road to get shopping for her. It's a nice day, there's an occasional gusty wind, and it's about 1 p.m. The road is quiet, there's only me on the road. hear a sudden rush of wind, like a noise on my right side. It sounds exactly like a car overtaking me at very high speed. I think nothing of it, just a funny gust of wind is all. I get shopping in town, and I return to my mother's house. I'm unpacking the groceries, and I jokingly say, I got overtaken by a ghost car today. My mother freezes. Where? Did you see it? Were its headlights on? And I stop and think, what the hell? And I explain that it was just a funny gust of wind that sounded like a car passing me. My mother then explains to me that for decades on the Sleet Road, the locals have known about the ghost car, usually at night. They see headlights coming, so they would pull over to the side of the road to let it go by, and until 15 years ago or so, it was just a one-lane road, and they wait ages, and then the headlights randomly just go out. A couple of people got run off the road by it. The headlights would appear behind them coming at high speeds, about to hit them. They would swerve off into the grass to avoid collision, and then they would get stuck in the soft mud. No car passes, no headlights. This has been happening there since the 1950s. I drive on that road regularly. I never hear a gust of wind like that, though, ever again, so I'm not sure if it was the ghost car or what now. I worked prepping paperwork for a government trade school. I worked night shifts with this older gent named Tim and my friend Dale. The job was filling out paperwork and making sure locals didn't break in and steal stuff in the 3 large dormitories that had been built. So I get stuck in C building, the farthest dormitory and the only one that's not connected to the other buildings. It was built originally to be a woman's only dorm. So Tim is our boss, and after showing me what I need to do, file papers, walk the dorm every couple hours, check the locks on the entrances, etc., he tells me, and by the way, make sure not to play any music, and then leaves. Now this confused the hell out of me, but I didn't have a radio then, so it didn't really matter, and I just went about my night. So fast forward a few weeks later, and I've asked both Tim and Dale about what the cryptic stuff was about, and neither of them would say anything about it. So I'm working, and it's a Thursday night, I think, and I've got the song That's Life by Frank Sinatra stuck in my head, and I wind up whistling it over and over. And after a good half hour of paperwork, I decided to go buy myself a Mellow Yellow from one of the vending machines. I buy the drink, and I take a huge drink of it, and I realize something. The whistling hasn't stopped. Now, I'm not saying that I'm some mystical being, Kenny G, apex predator, capable of drinking and whistling at the same time. I'm saying that somebody else was whistling along with me. Now, I'm about spooked by this, and I wind up doing a walkthrough with the small bat that most refer to as a maglite, only to find nothing. I return to the office and I get back to paperwork, and I ignore how weird that was when I started to hear whistling again. Now this is in Idaho during the winter, so the building was already cold as hell, but when I'll refer to it as a him, started whistling, it became frigid. I was scared and confused now. Scared because I'm experiencing some sci-fi ghost hunter stuff, and confused because he keeps whistling a 3-second piece of the song, pausing, and then repeating it again. Finally, I realized that he was prompting me to keep whistling. So now, my fear overridden by curiosity, I do the only thing I could think of, and I started whistling with him. Instantly, the room was toasty warm. I actually had to take off my coat after a while, and the feeling of dread that I felt was gone. I wound up taking my lunch break an hour later, and upon returning, everything was back to normal, though I decided not to tempt fate anymore by whistling. Now, I'm a fan of Sinatra, and from my previous job as a painter, I had a portable CD player radio with an MP3 CD that had about 300 or so songs on it, consisting of his discography and similar artists. After experiencing a whistling ghost who's also a Sinatra fan, I decided it would be worthwhile to risk to bring them in. And plus, whistling for an hour really chapped up my lips, so I'm not doing that again. It turns out that it was a brilliant idea. The moment that I plugged in the CD player and Sinatra started playing, the temperature in my office went from frigid to in front of the fireplace, comfy, and I started to feel happy for no reason. It becomes a regular thing at work for me to play the mix CD, and I didn't have to worry about Tim or Dale finding out since they never came to check on me either. So one early morning, probably like 2 a.m., maybe a month later, I sat in the office and I heard heavy footfalls, like boots outside my office that kept getting closer. Eventually they stopped, right in front of the CD player, and I hear it switch from Luck Be a Lady to static as he starts cycling through the stations. At this point, it got cold as balls in the office, and I hear the I'm a Little Bit Country part from that one song whistled. So I told him which station was country, and the radio switched over to it. I guess he was tired of listening to the same songs over and over. The office warmed up after that, and I witnessed something crazy. One of the chairs in the common area, where I had the CD player, moved out from under a table, and leaned back like somebody was reclining in it. And then the table made 2 whump noises and leaned slightly towards the chair. From then on, I would just set the radio up and let him decide what we listened to, and it made the overall job experience pretty awesome. The only other super interesting thing to happen there was him pulling up a chair to watch YouTube with me. I was watching a Sinatra performance and he moved my drink to put his feet up on the desk, and Dale being pissed off that I pulled some, quote, voodoo horseshit to befriend a, quote, evil spirit. Apparently the whistler threw a chair through the office window when Dale had been playing some screamo music. I'm sad though, because I know that place is now a dorm filled with 60+ people, and I feel that somebody might get hurt, maybe someday, if they haven't already. I don't know. So I'm Australian, and I live in this rural-ish sort of town that's on the coast, and I work in the next township over. Between these 2 townships is a national park, and the only roads that connect the 2 are really crappy, to put it mildly. The only establishment in the next township where I work is the pub where I work. So this one night, I'm driving back from there, and it's around 1 a.m. It had been raining about 15 minutes prior to this, so the roads are really slippery and just generally wet and not so good. And I noticed this car that's partly on the road and partly off the road. It looks like that they've lost control and hit a tree. The driver's side door is all kinds of screwed up and is slightly ajar. I pull up beside the car and I put my hazard lights on, and I see somebody unconscious in the driver's seat. The whole situation feels really uneasy. This is the first time that I've ever been the first responder in a crash. I can't call the cops or the ambulance yet because I have no cell signal, especially right in this area. As I'm walking over toward the car, I notice this strange smell. It's the same smell that I remember from, like, a science class when we dissected a sheep's kidney. The driver seems to be in his mid-50s, and he has longish gray hair. And when I looked at him, he actually looked familiar, and I remembered serving him a couple of times at the pub. I opened the driver's side door to check that he's okay, and his lower torso is covered in blood. His shirt's all kinds of screwed up, and I can see what looks to be a long gash in his stomach. He doesn't seem to be breathing either, but the blood is pretty fresh, so I figured that it couldn't have happened long before I got there. I hear some rustling in the bushes, like a really large pig or a kangaroo, and the weird smell gets stronger. So I get back in my car to begin to drive up the road to get some cell service, and I see this weird humanoid shape come out of the bushes and bend over the car in the rearview mirror. I get back into cell range as I near my township, and I call the cops immediately to report it. I don't mention what I saw because I don't want to be locked up in the loony bin. The next day I end up talking to one of my coworkers who's in the rural fire service, and he's one of the people who ended up reporting to the crash. He says that they didn't find a body, but they saw all the blood covering the driver's seat and some splattered around the interior of the car. There was no obvious indication as to what could have cut the guy up because the crash wasn't really that bad. The coworker figures that the guy was disoriented from the crash and walked off into the bushes. I tell him that the guy was very dead when I got there. He wasn't breathing, and he'd stopped bleeding too. The coworker gives me a weird look and says this really freaks him out. I don't mention the other thing because I don't think he believed me. Small townships like this usually have things like this be in the paper or local news or something, just like word gets around. But there was nothing. There was nobody talking about it. There was no media coverage. Another coworker tells me that the federal cops are looking into it, and so far there's been no attempt to locate the body. I get contacted by the cops again to tell them what happened. I lie about seeing the guy. I say that the car was empty when I got there, and I still have to drive past that crash site late at night, and I get really, really uncomfortable whenever I pass it. So this takes place in Poland, where I'm from. By the time this took place, I was around 11 or 12 at the time, and my school teachers thought it was a great idea to take the kids into the forest and onto this shooting range, hunting place / campground. And all of us are happy about it because there is a super nice campsite and it's just a generally lovely area. The teachers don't really care what we do as long as, we don't get too lost. They let the kids all wander off into the forest at will and stuff though. So a group of us, probably 6 or so, decide to go on an adventure of sorts. We're carrying sticks around, basically just LARPing about some fantasy thing that we're making up in our heads. And then one of the girls suddenly goes, "Aw," and there's a bunch of tiny boars in a small clearing. Now, eventually, after our little cooing session, we realized that they probably wouldn't be here alone. So as we're starting to leave the area, we hear something running. And we all just kind of panic because nobody wants to be in front of a full mama boar when they're angry. So we're running at, to us, what would be incredible speed, and we don't look where we're running because we are just scared. And once we're sure that we're not being chased anymore, we stop and look around, and we realize we're lost. We just start walking towards where we think the campsite is. Looking back, we should have just stayed put, but we were kids. And we come across this small hut that's between the trees, and it's burned in half. The weird thing is, it's like perfectly in half. You can see a straight black line cutting the house, and there's even bits of the walls remaining. There's no signs of a fire around anywhere though. None of the trees or the grass even have any char marks on them. So we decide to just walk inside because, again, we have that childhood curiosity still in us. There's one room and a kitchen that seemed to be in a perfect state. There was some furniture even still there. One of the walls is entirely burned with the door collapsed on the floor. And we're guessing that at one time it might have been a spacious bedroom. Only the floor remains and a bit of the walls, and most of this room is burned down. And we think nothing more about it. Our child minds just assume that this is logical and completely fine. So we walk out of our little half hut and look at the tree line. We see something moving. We can't really pinpoint the movements because it's like suddenly half of the trees started shaking and moving about. All of us can feel a vibration in our bodies, It feels almost like a minor earthquake. This is probably exaggerated since I'm thinking back on it, but that's what it felt like. Whatever this is genuinely looks like a giant mass made completely out of leaves and branches with what might have been two small trees sticking out on one side. We all just think, what the hell is this? And then we also realize that we can't smell any kind of burnt wood despite standing right next to the hut. Instead, there's a faint scent of gunpowder or sulfur and maybe rotten eggs. It seems like the bush thing is walking around, so we just kind of stare at it, trying to comprehend and understand what's going on. And even now, thinking back on it, it moved so weird. It's like your brain can't comprehend what's going on. And then it knocks down a tree. And this wasn't just a fragile birch or anything. It was a full-on oak tree that fell down and shook the ground. The girls start crying instantly, which seemed to break the feeling of being paralyzed. We hear people screaming from somewhere behind us. We assume it's the teacher and run toward it. We make it back to the campsite, eventually in hysterics. The girls keep yelling about the giant tree monster. We end up lying about everything and just say that we got spooked by a boar. And the teachers ask us, "Didn't you see the tree falling down? We heard it all the way here." And we say, "Nope, just boars." The rest of the camping trip, though, was pretty uneventful, so we gathered everything up and we head back home. So about a month later, I gather the courage to tell my dad. My dad is actually curious about what we saw. He grabs some kind of gun, I don't know what kind or anything, sorry, and we go for a ride. We park at the shooting range campsite, and I try to guide him towards the hut. I remember these big gallows-looking structures, and sure enough, we stumble upon them shortly after. We follow these weird structures. There was about 6 to 10 of them, and then we find the hut, but now it's completely burned down. There are still no traces of a fire around it. My dad's smarter than a child, obviously, and figures that something is a little off. The hut is extremely small, and he knows these forests well. His father was a huntsman, but he doesn't recall there ever being a hut there. And we noticed deep claw marks on all the trees all around the area. And from what we know, there's no bears in this area, just boars, foxes, and deer. And then we hear the trees breaking again. Loads of birds flying out of the woods, and it feels like the whole forest is moving, the ground and everything. There's a lot of noise, there's animals running around us, and this absolutely huge thing just walking up in the distance. My dad picks me up and tells me to hold on. We run out of the forest, into the car, and back home, and we don't mention it to anyone. I actually almost forgot about this whole thing happening until I met up with a few friends last December when I was visiting Poland again. We shared lots of bizarre childhood stories, and this one made me realize that I had never told them that my dad and I went back. They didn't fully believe that we went back, but we remember the details of the shared experience just the same. They remembered the half-burnt hut, the weird tree bush monster moving around, even the weird gallows-like structures. And my dad doesn't deny this at all. Him and Grandpa have a lot of weird forest stories from around my hometown as well, so this was nothing out of the ordinary for them. But if anyone knows, maybe you can tell me just what the hell we saw out there. So, what did you think of those stories? Which one was your favorite one? Let me know down in the comments. For me, I enjoyed them all. They were pretty spooky in their own way, you know? But anyways, do you have your own story? I have an email down in the description that you can send a story to if you would like to see it in a video. And if you want to support the channel, there's links down there too. So with that, I think I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.